Hi, I'm Amelia. Nice to meet you. Before I tell you my story, kindly hit subscribe and tell me where you rewatching from and the time. Now let's dive in. I'll be honest, when the invitation arrived, my first instinct was to toss it in the recycling bin. It was a glossy, over-the-top card with "Family is forever" embossed in gold lettering. The kind of sentiment that sounded warm in theory, but in my family's case, it was more like a warning label. The reunion was Anna's idea, of course. My cousin, 3 months older than me, and somehow convinced that gave her seniority over my entire existence, had a knack for making everything about herself. She was a social butterfly with a permanent filter on her life. I was the scientist who'd rather spend Saturday in a lab coat than a cocktail dress. And that, apparently, was a mortal sin in our family. I turned the card over in my hands, imagining the room full of relatives who'd spent my entire life pretending I was less interesting, less accomplished, less there. My PhD? A cute little project. My published research? Nice, but when are you settling down? If there was an Olympic event for backhanded compliments, they'd win gold every time. But then somewhere between irritation and curiosity, I thought, maybe this is the year I stop letting them write my story for me. I RSVP'd yes before I could talk myself out of it. The reunion was being held at the Maplewood Inn, a historic building with white-painted balconies and the kind of creaky wooden floors that whispered secrets. The air smelled like cinnamon and coffee when I walked in, but underneath it was that tense electric charge you only feel when people with years of unresolved drama are forced into the same room. Anna spotted me almost immediately. Her smile was flawless, lipstick red and magazine ready, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Amelia, you made it." She kissed the air beside my cheek and immediately launched into a rundown of who was there, who had gained weight, and which distant cousin had just gotten divorced. It wasn't a conversation. It was a broadcast. When she dragged me toward the buffet, I caught snippets of whispers. "Oh, Amelia's here? Didn't think she'd bother. She's the science one, right?" The way they said science one made it sound like a minor inconvenience, not a career that had taken me halfway across the world and earned me an award from the National Science Foundation. The first real hit came when Uncle Ray started passing around a photo album. Pictures from past reunions, smiling faces, picnic tables, kids chasing frisbees across green lawns. I flipped through, looking for myself. I wasn't there. Not in the 2019 picnic spread, not in the 2016 group shot. Even photos I knew I'd been in were cropped so that my face was out of frame. My stomach knotted. Anna leaned over, glancing at the page. "Oh, you probably just weren't around much those years," she said lightly, her eyes daring me to challenge her. "I was at every single one," I said, my voice calm but sharp enough to slice paper. She smiled wider. "Funny how memory works, isn't it?" That night, back in my hotel room, I sat cross-legged on the bed with my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I had two options. Let them keep shrinking me into the margins, or remind them exactly who they were dealing with. I chose the second. Before I shut my laptop, I smiled. Tomorrow, I thought, they'll remember me. I woke up the next morning with the kind of clarity you get after finally deciding you're done playing small. The hotel curtains let in a thin strip of sunlight, landing right across my laptop. It felt like a sign. The reunion schedule, emailed by Anna weeks earlier, was still open on my phone. Today's big event? The family highlights brunch, where everyone would take turns sharing updates about their lives. Normally, these updates meant someone announcing a new baby, a business venture, or a house renovation. Mine usually got boiled down to Amelia's still doing that science thing, right? Before they moved on to someone else's dog's birthday party. Not this year. I dressed carefully, not in a lab coat, tempting, but in a fitted navy dress with clean lines. Professional sharp. The kind of outfit that said I am here on purpose. I slipped my gold NSF pin onto the lapel, subtle, but noticeable if you knew what it was. The dining room was buzzing when I walked in. Anna was already at the center table, her laughter carrying over the clinking of coffee cups. She clocked me immediately, her gaze flicking over my dress like she was scanning for weakness. "Morning," she called brightly. "We saved you a seat right next to Aunt Judy." Of course. Aunt Judy, professional gossip and keeper of all family grudges. I smiled as if she'd handed me a gift. Perfect, I said, sliding into my chair. As plates of waffles and fruit made their way around, Anna tapped her glass for attention. Okay, everyone, let's start our little round robin. Who wants to go first? Cousin Matt went on about his new truck. Aunt Judy talked about her garden, sprinkling in a complaint about the neighbor's cat. A few others followed, short, casual, safe. When my turn came, Anna gave me that same syrupy smile she'd worn yesterday. And Amelia, you're still in that research job? I let the pause stretch just long enough for a few people to look up from their plates. Yes, I said slowly, though it's been an eventful year. I watched curiosity spark in a few faces. In March, I presented at the International Climate Conference in Geneva. Last month, one of my studies on renewable energy made the front page of Scientific American. And just last week, I accepted a position as lead scientist for a project funded by the National Science Foundation. It's kind of a big deal. I didn't raise my voice, but the room went still. Even the clinking of silverware stopped. Anna's smile didn't falter, but her knuckles whitened around her mimosa glass. Wow, that's great, Amelia. You must be so busy. Busy, I echoed with a small nod. But worth it. We're working on solutions that could impact millions of lives in the next decade. Aunt Judy blinked, as if trying to decide whether this was something to be proud of or suspicious about. The brunch rolled on, but the shift was subtle and delicious. People kept sneaking glances at me, their expressions flickering between surprise and something else. Not admiration, not yet, but the first crack in that wall of dismissal they'd built around me. When it ended, Anna caught me by the coffee urn. You could have told me about all that before, she said, her voice low. I met her gaze evenly. Why? You never asked. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I could tell she didn't like the new game I was playing, one where I wasn't shrinking for her convenience. As I walked away, I noticed Uncle Ray whispering to his wife while pointing in my direction. The kind of whisper you knew wasn't meant to be subtle. Good. Let them whisper. I was just getting started. By the afternoon, the brunch was a memory, but its ripple effects were everywhere. I caught fragments of conversation when I walked past the lobby, my name paired with words like Geneva and lead scientist, in tones that sounded equal parts impressed and confused. Anna, however, seemed determined to pretend my moment hadn't happened. She floated from group to group, telling stories loud enough to pull focus, laughing just a shade too brightly. But her eyes kept darting toward me, like she couldn't decide if I was a threat or a problem she could still contain. The next item on the reunion agenda was the family history hour, where everyone gathered to look at old photographs projected on a screen. Anna was in charge, naturally. She loved playing curator, especially when it meant controlling the narrative. The lights dimmed, and the first image popped up, our grandparents on their wedding day. Then came a sequence of birthdays, graduations, beach trips. Each photo was met with laughter, groans, or someone shouting out a memory. I sat there waiting. When the slide from the 2015 reunion appeared, my stomach dropped. I remembered that year vividly, partly because I'd flown back from a research trip in Iceland just to be there. In the original picture, I'd been standing on the far right in a red sweater. In this version, the cropping was so tight it looked like I'd never existed. A quiet heat rose in my chest. By the time the 2018 photos came up, I knew the pattern. If I was in them at all, I was half obscured or relegated to the background. Strange, I said aloud, my tone casual. I remember standing next to Anna in that one. Heads turned. On the screen, Anna chuckled lightly. Oh, sometimes photos get cropped to fit the slideshow format. Sure, I said, keeping my smile fixed. Though it's funny, the cropping seems to happen mostly to me. The room shifted, just slightly. A few relatives avoided my gaze, others exchanged quick glances. Anna moved on to the next slide faster than necessary. Afterward, in the hallway, Cousin Matt caught up to me. You really think she's doing it on purpose? He asked in a low voice. I looked at him steadily. Matt, I'm a scientist. Patterns matter to me. And this one's been going on for years. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. I mean, yeah. I've noticed. It wasn't an apology, but it was the first verbal crack in the unspoken agreement to keep me small. That night, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my camera roll. I had my own versions of those group photos, uncropped, unedited. Every time I appeared, it was proof they'd gone out of their way to erase me. I started a folder, Unedited Truth. Each image went in with a date and a note about where I'd been and what I'd been working on at the time. If they wanted to erase my history, I was going to make sure I had the receipts. Later, as I walked past the hotel bar, I overheard Anna talking to Aunt Judy. She's just making it all about her. Like she's trying to prove something. Aunt Judy murmured something back, too soft for me to catch. I kept walking, but my mind was already moving. They thought this was about proving myself to them. It wasn't. It was about showing the whole family and maybe even myself that I'd been there all along. And tomorrow, I plan to make that impossible to ignore. The next morning was the open story session, an informal gathering where anyone could stand up and share a memory or story about the family. Usually, it was lighthearted stuff. The time Uncle Ray accidentally set the grill on fire, or how Grandma once drove halfway to Florida before realizing she'd left Grandpa at the gas station. I'd never participated before. Not because I didn't have stories, but because mine never seemed to fit the tone. This time, though, I wasn't planning on playing by their rules. When Anna called for volunteers, the usual suspects went first. Laughter rolled easily around the room, clinking coffee cups keeping time. I waited. Finally, when the lull came, I stood up. "I have a story," I said. A ripple of surprise passed through the room. I don't think anyone expected me to step forward, certainly not Anna, whose smile froze halfway in place. I walked to the front and faced them. Some of you might not know this, but I've been to every single reunion since I was 13. Every one. I've flown in from Iceland, Switzerland, South Korea, sometimes landing just hours before showing up here. A few people murmured, nodding faintly. But here's the funny thing, I continued, pulling my phone from my pocket. When I look through the official albums, I'm barely there. Cropped out. Pushed to the edge. Missing entirely. And yet, I tapped my screen, and the TV behind me lit up with my own slideshow, unedited, full-frame photos from the same years. In each one, I was clearly present, smiling, standing shoulder to shoulder with cousins who now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I'm not showing these to embarrass anyone," I said, my voice steady. "I'm showing them because I've spent years thinking I was imagining it. That maybe I wasn't as much a part of this family as I thought. But the truth is..." I clicked to the next slide, me holding a field research kit, sunburned and grinning, the reunion tent in the background. I was always here, even when the pictures told a different story. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the projector. Anna stood abruptly. "Okay, well, we don't need to make this into..." I turned to her. "Into a what?" A moment. "Because for me, it already has been. Every year." Aunt Judy cleared her throat, but didn't speak. Matt leaned back in his chair, watching with something like approval. I took a breath, letting the silence settle. I'm proud of what I've done outside this family. I've been part of projects that will affect the world for generations. But I've also wanted to belong here. And maybe now, we can start telling the whole truth in our stories, pictures included. I stepped down and walked back to my seat without waiting for applause. There wasn't any, but that was fine. My heart was pounding, my palms were sweating. But for the first time in years, I felt solid. Anna didn't make eye contact for the rest of the morning. A few people approached me quietly, saying things like, "I had no idea," or "That was brave." Others avoided me entirely. It didn't matter. The seed was planted. That night, as I closed my laptop, I thought, tomorrow's the farewell dinner. And if they think today was uncomfortable, they haven't seen anything yet. Alright, I'll make Chapter 5 flow naturally from Chapter 4, with the farewell dinner becoming the moment where everything tips and Amelia finally gets the recognition she's been denied. By the time the farewell dinner rolled around, the energy in the room felt different. Not better, just charged. People spoke in lower voices. Some greeted me with careful politeness, others offered stiff nods, as if still deciding what to do with the version of me they'd seen yesterday. Anna, as always, had the best seat in the house, center table, perfect view of everyone. But tonight she was quieter, her usual effortless control slipping just enough for me to notice. Dinner moved along with the usual small talk. Prime rib, roasted vegetables, clinking wine glasses. I let the chatter wash over me, staying quiet, listening. Halfway through dessert, Uncle Ray stood up to make the closing toast. Normally, this was a quick, sentimental thing. But tonight, he lingered. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, looking around the tables, "about what it means to be a family. About what we choose to remember and what," he glanced at me briefly, "we sometimes forget." Anna shifted in her chair. Ray cleared his throat. "I'll admit, when Amelia spoke yesterday, it hit me. I realized I've seen her here every year, but I've never really seen her. And I think that's on all of us." A strange, brittle quiet spread across the room. Before I could react, Ray gestured toward me. "Amelia, would you say a few words? You've had quite a year." I hadn't planned on speaking again, but something in the expectant hush told me this was my moment. I rose, my napkin falling softly onto my chair. "Thank you, Uncle Ray," I said, my voice calm. "I didn't come here to prove myself. I came because I wanted to be here. Because I am part of this family, whether the albums say so or not." I let that settle before continuing. "I've spent years working on climate solutions that could change lives. It's been hard, rewarding, exhausting. But I've also learned something along the way. You can't wait for people to hand you a place at the table. Sometimes you have to pull out your own chair and sit down anyway." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then slowly, Aunt Judy, of all people, started clapping. It was hesitant at first, but others joined in, until the sound filled the room. Anna smiled tightly, but her eyes told another story, one of reluctant acceptance, or maybe resignation. She didn't interrupt. She didn't try to redirect. When the applause faded, people began approaching me. Some offered genuine congratulations, others awkward apologies. Even Matt, who'd been on the fence, said, "Guess we've been underestimating you for a while, huh?" "Guess so," I said, my tone light. But inside, something deep and quiet shifted. Later, as I left the dining room, I passed the table where the reunion scrapbook sat open for signatures. I flipped it to a blank page and wrote, "Amelia Bennett, here, and always have been." I closed the book gently and walked away, the sound of voices behind me fading into the night air. The recognition didn't erase the years of being overlooked. But it was a start. And more importantly, it was mine. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed my story, don't forget to like and subscribe. You will also enjoy other stories by AJ Family Drama. Until next time, bye.